Do you remember the festival, the feast that we are at as we come into John chapter 8? Booths or tabernacles, that's right. And what elements, what events is the Feast of Booths and the Feast of Tabernacles recalling? The tabernacle, okay. What else? The wilderness wanderings, right? So I think we would probably call it something like the Feast of Tents or something. So it was recalling this time where they were wandering in the wilderness. They didn't have houses to live in. They were wanderers during this time. Now, this Feast of Tabernacles was one of three big festivals. They would have the Passover, right, which would come about the end of our March, beginning of April, and then after that, 50 days later, so they counted it by Sabbath, so the next day plus 7 Sabbaths would be what we call the Pentecost, or the Feast of the First Fruits. Pentecost was the Greek name for it. So they would celebrate that. And then they would have the Feast of Tabernacles, and that would be like our September, October time, because it was the feast that they celebrated at the end of the harvest. Now, the reason I mention that is because on those three occasions, there was a call for Jews to come from wherever they might be. So not only would you have locals there, but generally you would have people come from Galilee. You would have, and even I would say at this time, Jews are dispersed throughout the world. And so you would have them come back for that. So we'll note that again. I mean, it'll be a while, but when we get to Acts 2, that's what's going on, is they've all gathered together, probably for Passover and Pentecost, but at least for that Pentecost celebration. So anyway, so that's what's happened. And that, I think, will kind of help us consider what's going on here. Remember, in John 7, there is a wide range of opinions about Jesus, right? Just across the board. And also a wide range of understanding about how the leadership feels about Jesus, right? They ask questions all the way from, does the leadership think he's the Christ? To, are we really seeking to kill him? To, does he have a demon because he thinks we're seeking to kill him? So they have all kinds of questions about even the approach of the leaders to Jesus. And so this is going to be one of those gatherings where there's going to be a diverse audience going on. I don't know if the setting is the same, but we don't have another setting really mentioned all the way till the middle of chapter 10. So from here until 10 verse 21, it kind of all seems to be something that just kind of flows right together. And then I think it's 10 verse 22 that it mentions the Feast of Dedication, which is going on right now. Hanukkah is what the Feast of Dedication is. It was not one of those that was prescribed by the old law, but it rose during the intertestamental period. So that'll kind of keep our focus. Chapter 8 will flow right into chapter 9. We'll talk about that. It'll be next Wednesday night. And then we'll go to Luke for a little bit and then come back to chapter 10. Okay, anything else we should say? Probably that might have been too much leading up to it. But we come to 753, really, and everyone went to his home. Does anybody have a bracket right in front of that in your Bible? All right, so if you're using an ESV, NIV, I use an updated New American Standard, anything like that, it's going to have a little bracket at the beginning of verse 53 and then go all the way down to the end of verse 11. Do you see the bracket on the other side of that? Now, if you've got a footnote, it may say something like, Austin, what does your footnote say there?
It says
Earliest manuscripts don't contain it. I think the evidence is better for this section than what some of the people say against it, like the English Standard Version. Earliest manuscripts don't contain it. And I think that's probably true given what they've got. But the number of manuscripts that do hold it, it's a whole bunch. And really what has happened is this little section has kind of floated in different places. So it's been found in other manuscripts where it was like included in the book of Luke and stuck here. So the question, is not only about whether or not it belongs there, but whether or not this is the place that it goes. I think, and I don't know that we want to take the time to talk about this. I'm not prepared to have this discussion tonight. But having done reading on it, I think the evidence for this section is actually pretty good that it would be original. The reason I want to say that is because I don't want to spend a lot of time thinking about it if it's not actually an occasion where Jesus was involved. Now, I don't know if it belongs right here in John 8 or if it should have gone in somewhere in the book of Luke, but I think the evidence for its authenticity is very good. And so, yes, okay, very good. Yeah, so that's the thing, is like, it's not in the oldest ones that we have, but it's definitely in the majority, and those majorities were copied from somewhere. And so they are coming from something older than them. And so that raises a lot of questions. And if you have questions about that, maybe I can point you in the direction of some resources that you can look at. But I want to spend the time looking at this occasion because I think it's worth looking at. You want to take us through it first?
Yeah. If he's not prepared to talk about that, then I should. Go ahead and say that. But yeah, so at the end of last week, Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. So we'll pick up in 8, verse 2. It says, and early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat and taught them. And the scribes and the Pharisees bring a woman taken in adultery, and having set her in his midst, they said unto him, Master, this woman hath been taken in adultery in the very act. Now in the law of Moses commands us to stone such. What then sayest thou of her? And this they said, trying him, that he might thereof accuse him. But Jesus stooped down, and with his finger wrote on the ground. When they said, continued asking him, he lifted up, said unto them, he that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. And again he stooped down, with his finger he wrote on the ground. And they, when they heard it, went out one by one, beginning with the eldest and to the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman, where she was in the midst. And Jesus lifted up and said unto her, Woman, where are they? Did no man condemn thee? She said, No, my Lord. And Jesus said, Neither do I condemn thee. Go thy way and sin no more. So the first thing that I caught kind of once again thinking about was we find Jesus, it says early in the morning, right back teaching. So you think about all the conversations that he had in the last chapter and the things that was going on and the fact that half the crowd was trying to kill him and all this that's going on. It says that he went out and withdrew himself to the Mount of Olives, and now early in the morning we find him right back teaching. And it just shows the commitment and shows his devotion to the Father's work. And then I think of my life, as far as application to me, I have no excuses. When it comes to me trying to make excuses for not carrying out the work of the Lord and carrying out the service of God, there are no excuses. Because you think of Jesus' life, how easy it would have been to say, you know what? I need to take a step back. I need to get away. These people are trying to kill me, but we never see that. We constantly see him going and doing the Father's work and putting himself in these situations to carry out what God has asked him to do. Anything on that?
No, just that the people are coming to him to hear his teaching, and I just want to put forward that the people that are coming to him are probably people from Jerusalem and maybe even Galileans and other kind of people there. You can carry us on through.
All right, so in verses 3, 4 there, they bring this adulterous woman. I find it kind of weird that they come to him and they call him master. Some versions may say teacher, but the previous chapter, he was called a deceiver. He was called crazy. He was called, he had a devil. He's called all kinds of things. And now they come to him and they call him master. And I feel that this is kind of all a trap, that they're coming to him, trying to get him to contradict himself. Is he going to carry out the law of Moses and put this woman to death, and then that would contradict his own doctrine of mercy and forgiveness? And, he tells us he's there to seek and to save the lost, that he's there to save the sinners. Well, they bring this woman to him. Is he going to kill her? Because if he does that, well, then everything he said about mercy and forgiveness and all that's now contradicted. Or if he doesn't kill her, he's not upheld the law of Moses. So this whole thing is a trap. It's just to set him up and try to get him to contradict himself.
I'd say it also is a trap because if he says we should execute her, that puts him in conflict with the Romans, because the Jews don't have the authority to do this. So I think that's what they're constantly trying to do, is either discredit him with the people, which getting him to break the law would do, or discredit him with the Romans. One way or the other, that would be a benefit to them. But I think you're exactly right. He also teaches a lot about forgiveness and that sort of thing. So I think it's very similar to what they do with the tax question later on. And I think in that question that they come up and they say, teacher, we know that you always answer in truth and you're not ever swayed by it. They build it up in this way to kind of to sweeten it and him, so that I think they're trying to encourage him to just really answer plainly, and do so in a way that takes a clear stand. So, yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah. It was they're trying to see what he says about it just so they can use that instead of doing whatever they should have done on their own. Yeah. That's a very good point. That's a great question. Yeah, if you want to see the insincerity or the hypocrisy or whatever in that, it's like, if she's caught in the act of committing adultery, he is as guilty, and according to the law, maybe even more guilty than she was, because it was, he would have been the dominant in the situation. But yeah, that's exactly right. That you immediately see Jesus is able to see through it. Of course, they think they're putting him in a tight spot. And it is in some ways, but Jesus' answer is not only going to address the question, it's going to go deeper and address them. And that is one of the things that makes this account, like, it rings with truth about who Jesus is, because it's just like every question, he never just answers the question that he's asked. He always goes deeper than that. And I think that's what's going to happen in this.
Any other thoughts or questions, comments? So then we find Jesus, it doesn't tell us, and I'm sure it's because it's not important, but you would like to know what he scooped down and started writing on the ground. And he's kind of just really kind of ignoring them. Like, it's not even fazing him, and they come to him with this, and he's going to flip it completely on them. And instead of them putting him in a contradictory situation, he's going to turn it, and he's going to put it right back at them and say, well, he who is without sin cast the first stone. So now they are in a situation where they got to decide, do we do this? And so he flips it completely around. And then he goes right back to writing whatever he's writing. So you see his kind of demeanor of how he handles these tight situations.
Yeah, I don't know what he wrote either. It's interesting. There may be a link here, because the only person who is described as writing with his finger in the Old Testament is God. And so this is what I think is happening here, and somebody could argue against it, that would be fine. But they come to him and say, don't you know what the law of Moses said? And he stoops down and writes with his finger, just like had been done on Mount Sinai. It's almost as if he's saying, do I understand the law of Moses? Like, I'm the one who wrote it, right? In a very real way. And so they come questioning his ability to interpret the law of Moses. And this is just kind of maybe an echo or a link for us to see he's the one who gave it. And so it's foolish for them to be coming and asking them the question in this way. And so you say, notice here, he says, let him who is without sin be the one to throw the first stone. Yes, sir.
On that,
yes, sir.
It was not lawful for him to look at a woman who was naked.
Yeah.
And the diversion act of looking down would have been taken, because she probably was naked.
Yeah.
She was caught in the very act.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's interesting. I've never thought about it along those lines, so that's good. I will say this, when he says, let him who is without sin cast the first stone, I used to hear that mentioned a lot in my childhood, because my dad preached in the 90s, right? And Bill Clinton said, let him who is without sin cast the first stone, with regards to, and like Bill Clinton quoting the Bible, and that was the one place he quoted from. And I think the important thing to notice about this is he is not saying that the only way anybody could ever face judgment is if there were perfect people to bring it. I think when Jesus says, let him who's without sin, he's talking about in this case, in this instance, in this matter. If you are bringing her to me with a real, sincere, just approach to it, then you cast the first stone. And that is actually the law of Moses, right? It was the witnesses that were supposed to be the ones to throw the first stones. It was not just supposed to be the hearsay people. It was the people who witnessed the crime that were supposed to be the first stone throwers. Now, what happens here, I think, indicates that Jesus, first of all, obviously, he knows the law better than they do. They think he's putting them in a law trap. And he goes, hey, you think I hadn't read the law? You think I don't know the law? And he goes deeper than what they were thinking. And he says, if you're without sin in this matter, in this case, then you throw the first stone, because that's exactly what the law required. Anything else there?
No.
Anybody else so far? Yeah, that's a good question. So I think they probably would have had to bring a case to the Sanhedrin, and then it would have had to be approved by the Romans, if I understand right. Like, I don't think they had approval at all to do death sentences. And that we'll see that with the case of Jesus eventually. They will, in the Sanhedrin, they come to the conclusion that he's been a blasphemer. When they take him to the Romans, they have to say he claims to be king and says not to pay taxes, right? Their argument has to change with regards to that. Now, I don't know what the Romans would have done with regards to a woman caught in adultery. It seems to me they probably would not have thought of that as a death sentence. And really, again, I think this is an effort. Now, this woman was very well could have ended up being, I think they had very little disregard for her in this, right? Because if Jesus says, let's stone her, I think that they very well may have, I don't know what would have, they probably would have called the Romans in to try to stop him or something. Yeah. That's right. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right, that's right. You mean on their part, like they're showing that it's not yeah. Well, yes, and I think that would be the case maybe. Let me just use the tax example, because I think that's a good comparison in some ways with the taxes. Like for them to come to Jesus and say, is it law for us to pay taxes? Well, what authority, like they don't think he's some kind of leader or ruler. Like, why come to him with that question? And I think that's the same thing with it, is it's just a discrediting moment for Jesus. At least that's the attempt. I think you're exactly right about that. Anything else? Okay.
So once he throws this question about let them throw the first stone, we see their reaction. It says they left one by one, from the eldest to the last one. So that kind of once again shows that there was no real, it was all just a trap, and he puts it back on them. So they leave, and then he has a conversation there with the woman, and he says, he knows the answer, but he asks, where's everybody at? Where'd they go? Did they not, anybody condemn you? She says, no, my Lord. So he tells her, I condemn you not also, go and sin no more. And, the one thing I draw, which I try to bring application to myself in this, is we're all this woman. We have all sinned. We've all messed up. We've all fallen short, and we have to do the same thing she done, is to realize who Jesus is, realize that he's the answer, to ask for forgiveness, and then go and sin no more. So when he tells her that, that's not just to her, that's to everybody. It's realize that you have sin in your life, fix it, and then go sin no more.
Yeah, and I think it's important in this. Jesus does not, it seems to me here that what he's doing is, where are the accusers? Where are the witnesses that said they were going to act in this case, or who brought you to me? And he's like, if they are not here, right? If the witnesses are not here, I'm not going to condemn you. Now, obviously, Jesus knew whether or not what was going on. And the fact that he says, go and sin no more, I think is revealing that, we don't know all the details of what she was involved in. I would say this, when John writes this, look at verse 3, brought a woman caught in adultery, right? That's how John writes it. So I'm not necessarily doubting that she was actually caught in adultery. But Jesus says the answer here is repentance, right? And so under the law, should she have been stoned? If the witnesses were there and were acting in good faith, then yes. And Jesus is saying there's forgiveness. Go and sin no more. And so this is Jesus kind of, let me just mention this. One of the reasons that this may be missing from early manuscripts is there was actually a debate in the early church about whether or not Jesus approached this correctly, right? There were some people who said he should have had her stoned given the situation. And so people argued about that, and that may be one of the reasons why it's missing from some of those early manuscripts. But I think, of course, I believe Jesus approaches this exactly right. He is approaching it perfectly in line with the law of Moses, and then even calling her to repentance as she moves forward. Okay, anything else? Anything else? All right, let's look at verses 12 and following. I'm going to read from 12 to 20. Then Jesus again spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So the Pharisees said to him, you are bearing witness about yourself. Your witness is not true. And Jesus answered and said to them, even if I bear witness about myself, my witness is true, for I know where I come from, and I know where I am going, but you do not know where I come from or where I am going. You judge according to the flesh. I am not judging anyone. But even if I do judge, my judgment is true, for I am not alone in it, but I and the Father who sent me. Even in your law it has been written that the witness of two men is true. I am he who bears witness about myself, and the Father who sent me bears witness about me. So they were saying to him, where is your Father? Jesus answered, you know neither me nor my Father. If you knew me, you would know my Father also. These words he spoke in the treasury as he was teaching in the temple, and no one seized him because his hour had not yet come. All right, in verse 12, he says that he is the light of the world, and they're going to push back against that. But let me say just a statement here. I am the light of the world is one of his I am statements. We've seen one already. We saw I am the bread of life. Now we have I am the light of the world. We'll see a couple when we make it to chapter 10. If I understand correctly, in the Feast of Tabernacles, not only did they have that water ceremony where they would come and bring that water and pour it out, and remember John 7, Jesus says, if anybody's thirsty, let him come to me and drink. Here, they would have had also the court of the women, which was an outer court of the temple. They would have had that lit up very brightly, lights everywhere. And one of the reasons they did that was because they're remembering the wilderness. And remembering the wilderness, they would remember the water that came from the rock, but they also would have remembered being led by the pillar of fire. They weren't led, but their ancestors were led by the pillar of fire. And so they would light up the courtyard to be a memorial of the light in the wilderness. Jesus, perhaps in the presence of that light, maybe he's in the daytime, but they would have been familiar with that light. He says, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. We also, there's an echo of John 1 in this, that in him was the life, and the life was the light of men. Is that how, let me see. This is John 1, verse 4. In him was the life, and the life was the light of men. And so we have that mentioned here. Now, when Jesus says that, how do the Pharisees specifically respond to that? What do they say? You're a liar, right? You're not telling the truth. Now, they say, you are bearing witness about yourself. Your witness is not true. I don't know if they're calling Jesus a liar. I think what they're saying is, you are only giving testimony for yourself, and we're not going to take the testimony of one guy about himself, right? That is not valid in a hearing like this. And when we're trying to establish the validity of your claim, you don't get to just make a claim for yourself. Now, Jesus, how does he respond to that? My Father is witnessing with me, right? First of all, he says, even if I was just testifying on my own, My witness would be true because I'm telling the truth. But it's not just me. It's me and the Father. Now, as we read through the book of John, how is the Father testifying with Jesus? So Jesus is doing it by making these statements. Somebody say something. His works. I would say the miracles are the evidence that the Father is providing. So you have Jesus and what He's saying, and the works that He's doing, which are the word of the Father in some way, and testifying together, they are at work together. Now they say, where's your Father? Now, I don't know if they are kind of poking at Him, because I think Joseph is probably gone at this point, but where's your Father? And Jesus is saying, you don't know my Father because you don't know me. And if you knew me, you'd know my Father. And if you knew my Father, you would know me. You just don't have all the information that you need, even though He's tried to make that available to him. Now, nobody seizes Him. Notice that in verse 20. And they don't see. And now the question is why would they seize Him? I think it's because they realize who He's talking about as His Father. But nobody seizes Him because His hour had not yet come, right? And now John, that's his language. We're going to see His hour had not yet come. His hour had not yet come. It wasn't His hour. Then he'll say it's getting close to the hour. And then he'll say the hour has arrived. And so we're kind of following that language in the book of John. Anything through those verses?
Verse 12, when he says that I am the light, the last chapter we read, He was the living water.
That's right.
He's told them that He's the bread of life. So he's telling them that He's everything they need.
Yes, right.
And He's same thing for us today. He's the only thing that we need to make us whole and complete. He's the bread of life. He's the water. He's the light. But we don't need nothing else except Jesus.
Yeah.
And He's trying to get them to see that, and they're not seeing it.
Yeah, and those are beautiful images, especially because in John 6, it's absolutely connected to the wilderness, right? Because he's talking about the manna, and he's saying that was just bread that they ate, and they still died, but I'm the bread of life. John 7, they're thinking about the water that God provided in the wilderness. He said, if you want real water, come to me and drink. So all of this is wilderness associated. John 8, where he says, I'm the light of the world. They're recalling the light that He led them by in the wilderness. And I think in all those ways he's saying those things were wonderful and they were God gifts, but they were just a preview of what I am. Real bread, real water, real light. But they are reacting very much in the same way that the Israelites reacted in the wilderness, right? Complaining about the bread, right? John 6, it literally says that they grumbled when He started to. That's exactly what it said about them. John 7, they wonder what He's talking about with all the water. And in John 8, they're going to push back against the light that's guiding them. And so they're going to be a lot like the Jews in the wilderness. All right, anything through verse 20? Anything else? Okay. Go ahead and take us 21 and follow if you want to.
We'll go through 30. Says, He said, therefore again to them, I go away, and you shall seek me, and shall die in your sin. Whether I go, you cannot come. The Jews therefore said, will He kill Himself, that He saith, where He goes, ye cannot come? And He said unto them, you are from beneath, I am from above. You are from this world, I am not of this world. I said there unto you, that you shall die in your sins, for except you believe that I am He, you shall die in your sins. They said unto Him, who art you? And Jesus said unto them, even to that which I have been spoken to you from the beginning. I have many things to speak and to judge concerning you, howbeit that He that has sent me is true. The things which I heard from Him, these I speak unto the world. They perceived not that He spoke to them of the Father. And Jesus said unto them, when you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you shall know that I am He, and that I do nothing of myself, but that as the Father has taught me, I speak these things. And He said that sent me, and He that sent me is with me. He has not left me alone, for I do all things that are pleasing to Him. And as He spoke these things, many believed on Him. So we see here that, a lot of His talk has been kind of, I don't know the right word. It's not, He uses phrases, the bread of life and things. To me, this is just a straight, He's telling them exactly, if you don't believe on me, you're going to die in your sins. There's no more of this, I'm the living water, I'm the bread of life, what was the other?
The light of the world.
The light of the world. This is directly, if you don't believe that I am, that I'm saying I am, you're going to die in your sins. And that's pretty bold and blunt, especially in the situation of these people. Still, part of them's wanting to kill Him. And, now He's telling them, you're going to die in your sins. They may have not understood what that meant at this point. And so he starts talking to them about, them being worldly, thinking, physical, but he is from above. He's from heaven. He's from God. And then we see there in 25, to me, another powerful when they ask, well, who are you? He's been telling them this whole time who he is. He's been showing them through the miracles and the signs of who he is. And now they're going to ask, this question, who are you? And then when he goes down in 28, he says, when you have lifted up the Son of Man, you will know who I am. So that's a direct point to his crucifixion, And then I think of the statement of the soldier when he had been crucified. He says, truly this was the Son of God. That's kind of what I thought when I read this is when he's crucified, when it's finally done and everything's finished, people will truly know that he was who he said he was the whole time.
Yeah, and I think part of that in those verses is by his submissive obedience, it will reveal that he only does the Father's will. So you see that back up in the end of verse 26, the things which I heard from him, these I am saying to the world, and then you'll know that I am he, and I do nothing from myself, but I speak these things as the Father taught me. If anybody thought he was just making this up, right? If anybody thought that he was just doing this for his own glory or for his own power, when they see him lifted up and him not, challenge that, not push back on it, just accept that and go to the cross. If anything ever should have indicated that he was really telling the truth, right? That he was really sincere in what he was doing, him being lifted up should have been the thing that indicated that. Does that make sense? That here he is talking like this, and if he was getting rich or if he was, becoming very popular or getting a lot of power from this, you would say, oh, well, it's all just a scheme. When he is rejected and executed and then cries out on the cross, Father, forgive them, and into your hands I commit my spirit. When he does those sorts of things, then they should have known, then they would have known if they were really looking that it was in fact from the Father, and that he was in fact pleasing to God. I think this is a wonderful passage when we think about how we approach the scriptures with Bible authority. And I know this is kind of off the subject, but if anybody ever had a right to act on their own initiative, if anybody ever had the right to just do it the way they thought would be best, I think it would have been Jesus, don't you? And Jesus says, I do nothing of my own initiative. As I hear, that's what I do. I speak the things as the Father taught me. I always do the things that are pleasing to him. I will also say that I think I've mentioned this before, that there are doctrines about God forsaking Jesus on the cross. And here Jesus explicitly says, he is always with me. He has not left me alone, for I always do the things that are pleasing to him. If that's true up till John 8, it's certainly true in John 19 when Jesus is on the cross. He was always doing the things that were pleasing to the Father, and that was the greatest moment of it. And in that moment, it would be hard for me to take what Jesus says right here and then say, oh, but God left him at that moment. No, he didn't leave him alone because he was always pleasing to him. Okay, anything else through verse 30?
I got one more thing.
Yeah.
The fact there in 30 that it says many believed on him,
Mm-hmm.
That's why we see Jesus continue to go back and teach.
That's right.
Because through all this, they are people who are believing on him. So that's why we see him put himself in hard situations and continue to teach, because people are being affected. People are believing on him. So that's why he continues to do it.
That's right. Yeah, because the crowds. You're exactly right. So in verse 31, he's going to talk to those who had believed in him. Austin asked me this right before Bible class. I didn't have a good answer for him now, but I have a great answer. No, I don't have a great answer now. I didn't have a great answer for them or now. So he talks in verses 31, and I think all the way, I think maybe even 32 and 33, I think he's talking to those who believe in him, but they're going to turn, the conversation is going to turn very, can we say negative, right? From verses 34 on. Is Jesus still talking to the ones who believe in him? I think there's a couple of possibilities. One, he might be talking to those who believe in him but are shallow in their belief, right? It could be like those in John 6 who wanted to take him and make him king, right? They believed in him, but when he starts talking to them, it may be that he's saying, you think of me in the wrong way. It could also be, and I've made this case already, that it's a very mixed crowd here, right? Remember John 7, the range of questions that are being asked. I don't know that everybody that's standing there listening when he starts talking to the ones who believe in him are on the same page. And I would say this, that the they in verse 33 is that the they that's at the beginning, like in verse 13, the Pharisees, right? Is that the they in verse 33? Or is it those who believed in him, verses 31 and 32? I'm not sure about that. But I would say these are not, the questions that they're raising indicate that they don't have a full faith, even if they do believe in some way. So
That's what I think.
yeah, you think which part?
That many believed on him, and
Okay.
in the first 3 or 4 verses, he tests that. Like, if you
Oh,
truly
yeah.
believe me, you're going to do
Yeah.
my will.
Mhm.
And then they are the ones that saying, well, we're the children of
Yeah,
Abraham.
yeah, I got you. Yeah, so that idea of believing but not being committed to him shows up through the book of John. John chapter 12, many believed in him but would not confess him because they were afraid of being cast out of the synagogue. So it's not like that couldn't be a possibility here. And then I would say John 6, I'd say those people are believers, but they're believers in the sign and in the power. They're not believers in who he is. All right, we got to go a little bit more quickly here, right when we get to the good part. So, all right, 31, it's all good parts, right? It's all the book of John. All right, so Jesus was saying to those Jews who had believed him, if you abide in my word, then you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. They answered him, we are Abraham's seed and have never been enslaved to anyone. How is it that you say you will become free? Jesus answered them, truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who commits sin is the slave of sin. And the slave does not remain in the house forever. The Son does remain forever. So if the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed. I know that you are Abraham's seed. Yet you are seeking to kill me because my word has no place in you. I speak the things which I have seen with my Father. Therefore, you also do the things which you have heard from your father. Now, we'll come back to that idea in just a second. But he says, my word, if you will listen to my words and abide in them, then you'll be my disciples. And that truth that I'm teaching will make you really free. And they say, what do you mean free? We're Abraham's seed. We've never been enslaved to anybody. They say that as they are living under the subjection of the Roman Empire, right? And then we've already talked about Babylonian captivity and Assyrian captivity, and you remember they were in Egyptian bondage, right? Them being Abraham's seed hadn't even kept them from being in political slavery, but it certainly hadn't kept them from being in sin slavery. And he's saying, I know you're Abraham's descendants. I know you are his biological descendants, but you're not free if you're enslaved to sin. And the servant doesn't remain in the house forever, but the Son does. And he's saying, if the Son makes you free, then you will be really free. That's why you got to listen to me. Anything through 38? All right, you can take us through 39 and following if you want to.
I'll go 39 through 43 there. It says, they answered and said to him, our father is Abraham. Jesus said to them, if you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. But now you seek to kill me, a man that had told you the truth, which I heard from God. This did not Abraham. You do the works of your father. They said unto him, we were not born of fornication. We have one Father, even God. Jesus said unto them, if God were your Father, you would love me, for I came forth and have come from God, for neither have I come myself, but he that sent me. So, once again, he's using Abraham, and they're saying they're the seed of Abraham, and he's saying if you are the seed of Abraham, you do the things that Abraham done. And we know what kind of life Abraham lived. He was faithful to God. He served God. God was the priority in his life, and he's saying, this: if you were truly of Abraham, you wouldn't be doing the things you're doing, trying to kill me, and you would understand that I am from God. And anything.
Well, he's going to question who their real father is. Look at that from 43 to 47. Look specifically at verse 44. You are of your father, the devil, and you want to do the desires of your father. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. Whenever he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own nature, for he is a liar and the father of lies. So their efforts that are going to be to get rid of Jesus, their efforts to murder him, their lies, they're not being sincere as they approach him, all that indicates is they're not actually Abraham's descendants, they're satanic descendants. And so they need to watch themselves on that. Okay. let's go to 48, and I'm just going to read through the end of the chapter, and then we'll have about 5 minutes to make some comments. The Jews answered and said to him, "Do we not rightly say that you are a Samaritan and have a demon?" Jesus answered, "I do not have a demon, but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. But I do not seek my glory. There is one who seeks and judges. Truly, truly, I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death, ever." The Jews said to him, "Now we know that you have a demon. Abraham died, and the prophets also, and you say, if anyone keeps my word, he will never taste of death ever? Surely you are not greater than our father Abraham, who died. The prophets died too. Whom do you make yourself out to be?" Jesus answered, "If I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It is my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say he is our God. And you have not known him, but I know him. And if I say that I do not know him, I will be a liar like you, but I do know him and keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad." So the Jews said to him, "You are not yet 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham?" Jesus said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." Therefore they picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. All right, so Jesus says in this, when he says that y'all are trying, that they were not of God, and that, so they'll say, now we know you're a Samaritan, or that you have a demon. And Jesus says, if you'll keep my word, you'll live forever. And they say, now we know you're crazy, right? They say, Abraham died, the prophets died, and now you're making promises to us that if we listen to you, we'll never die. Are you better than Abraham? They're saying, are you better than Abraham? Are you better than the prophets that have come along? And Jesus' answer is, I'm not trying to glorify myself, but the Father's going to glorify me. And they say, well, you're not even 50 years old yet. You know, he actually says, your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day. He saw it and was glad. You're not 50 years old yet. What do you mean Abraham saw your day? I mean, he died 2,000 years ago. And he says, before Abraham was, I am. And it's really interesting, the Greek there, he doesn't say before Abraham was, I was, right? He's not just saying he's really, really old. He's saying before Abraham was, I am. He's using the name of God, which is why they pick up the stones to throw at him in verse 59. Really powerful statement.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. The power in that statement of, you know, them questioning, how did you know Abraham, or have you seen Abraham? And he says, before Abraham, I am. Mm-hmm. It shows the power and the boldness. And
that's right. Yeah. So they recognize his wording here, and that makes for a controversy here, and they're going to get ready to stone him. Now, it's interesting. Let me just kind of preview what's going on. And remember in John chapter 8, verse 12, he says, I am the light of the world. In John 9, he's going to pass by a blind man who's in pretty serious darkness, wouldn't you say? And we're going to see how that works. Now, I love this in the book of John. There are several occasions where it's almost as if one thing is kind of like the seed that's planted that then kind of blossoms into a whole conversation, right? Remember the feeding of the 5,000? That's mentioned in every one of the gospel accounts. And in most of them, it's 4 or 5 verses. In John's account, it's a few verses that then blossoms out into a whole conversation about how Jesus is the bread of life. Jesus' statement here that he's the light of the world, one verse, right? We seem to have gone away from that light of the world idea. And then it's going to blossom into a whole situation in John chapter 9 where we learn about what it means for Jesus to be the light, what it means for people to be in darkness, what it means for people to have come to the light. And it's going to be, I think John 9 is one of my favorite sections to look at. And Lord willing, we'll look at that. It'll be next Wednesday night because this coming Lord's Day is our singing night. Anyway, any questions or comments? We have 2 minutes maybe. Yeah.
As Austin said, you had this group that believed on him.
Mhm.
Now at the end, you have a group that's picked up stones that's about to try to kill
Oh
him.
wow,
How
yeah.
many of those was?
Well, you
if
see
that was
that,
a different
yeah.
group, or if that's
Yeah.
the same group that's now been.
That's interesting because in John 6, right, they want to make him king and then they walk away because his teachings are too hard. And here in John 8, maybe they're believing, but with his exchange with them, maybe they can't take that. All right, there's a few questions for our John 9 through 10, 21. Sorry. Yeah. And not a what? An ear tickler. That's exactly right. Yeah, he never wanted somebody following him because they were naive about what he was claiming. He was going to take it to its fullest. And if you don't want that, then okay. But if you not, it was not okay. It was actually a problem. But he wasn't going to just keep people on the shallow side. All right, anything else? All right, thank you very much for your good participation.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.